I wanted to support my husband, even if his mom treated me poorly, like a servant. Even if he never stood up for me. I sighed, the memory leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. But things changed when his brother got hurt. My brother-in-law, the golden child, the one everyone adored, became half paralyzed after a terrible accident. You'd think it would have sparked some compassion in my husband, Alex, and his mother. It didn't. Instead, they turned cruel, mocking him relentlessly. That's when I decided I wouldn't take it anymore. Holding my brother-in-law's hand, I promised him I would get back at them. Both of them. My name is Emma. I lived with my husband, Alex. We worked together, which only added to the stress. I was constantly overwhelmed, juggling a mountain of work at the office and at home. My in-laws, who lived way too close for comfort, always had their hands out, demanding my help. Alex never lifted a finger around the house. As for my mother-in-law, she treated me more like an indentured servant than family. Emma. Today, you need to take your brother-in-law to the hospital. My mother-in-law's shrill voice pierced through the phone, yanking me out of my precious day off. Taking care of my brother-in-law's needs had become my unofficial, unpaid job. Before the accident, I was basically his chauffeur. Now, I was his caretaker, helping him navigate a world suddenly filled with limitations. I'm always sorry, Emma, he'd say, his voice laced with guilt. I'd always smile, squeezing his hand reassuringly. I'm doing it because I want to. Don't worry about it. But his expression always remained troubled. He couldn't shake the feeling of being a burden, and frankly, I couldn't blame him. Not with the way my mother-in-law was acting. Before the accident, he was her favorite. Graduated top of his class, landed a fantastic job, kind and gentle to everyone. He was everything she ever wanted in a son. It was almost as if Alex, the second son, didn't exist. Sometimes, it made me angry, the way she treated him. That's why I tried to be supportive. I wanted him to feel loved, appreciated. But then, the accident happened. And just like that, her tune changed. I honestly wish you'd leave already, she'd snap, her words like shards of ice. Being disabled, unable to earn money, it's a shame to the family. I couldn't believe the cruelty, the utter lack of empathy. He'd helped them financially for years, and this is how they repaid him? It was sickening. And Alex? He joined in on the bullying. So, he's paralyzed and can't even move a hand, huh? Doesn't matter if you went to a fancy university. Once you can't walk, it's all downhill from there, right? Their laughter, cold and heartless, would echo in my ears long after they were gone. Every time I looked at my brother-in-law, struggling to adapt, unable to move his legs, I'd think, how can they? He'd always been good to Alex, too. Always patient, always supportive. And now, my husband was making his life a living hell. I tried talking to Alex. I reminded him of everything his brother had done for us. That his injuries were the result of a horrific accident, not a choice. I even opened up about how horribly his mother treated me. The verbal abuse, the endless errands, the feeling of being constantly used. I'd endured it all, hoping she'd change, that she'd accept me, that she'd appreciate Alex. But it was a fool's hope. My pleas fell on deaf ears. Alex was oblivious, basking in the unexpected attention from his mother, who suddenly saw him as the good son, the one who could do no wrong. It was sickening. One day, in the midst of my mounting frustration, Alex, with a clueless grin on his face, suggested, I was thinking, we could go to Hawaii. For a change of scenery. Have some fun. We could afford it, barely, thanks to my income and his brother's past generosity. But the thought of leaving my brother-in-law behind, alone, while they were off frolicking on a beach. What about your brother? Will he be okay, here alone? I asked. We'll hire a helper. Alex waved away my concerns. But I couldn't shake the guilt. The thought of enjoying myself while he was struggling felt wrong. A few days later, as if sensing my turmoil, my brother-in-law called me aside. "I heard about the trip," he said, his voice soft. "Don't worry about me. Go. Enjoy yourself. You've been there for me through all the hospital visits, everything. It's time you had some fun." His kindness, in the face of such adversity, brought tears to my eyes. I joked that going on a trip with my husband and mother-in-law might be more exhausting than staying home, which made him laugh. Encouraged by his words, I agreed to the trip. We started making plans, which, predictably, turned into a logistical nightmare thanks to my mother-in-law's ever-changing demands. Then, the day of the trip arrived. And that's when they dropped the bomb. "You stay and take care of your brother." My husband and his mother chuckled, their words like a slap in the face. "Since you usually take care of your son, this time, it's your turn. Hiring a helper costs money. You do it for free." They laughed it off as a joke as they headed towards the airport, leaving me standing there, speechless, gobsmacked, and for the first time in a long time, not angry. Once they were gone, I went to my in-laws' house. I found my brother-in-law lying down in the living room, and I told him everything. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice cracking. "I never imagined." He smiled sadly. "It's okay, Emma. This is probably for the best." I looked down at his immobile legs, at his hand, curled in on itself, and something inside me snapped. And then, he stood up. I stared at him, jaw agape, as he rose to his feet. "What's happening? How are you standing?" He chuckled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I'm not paralyzed, Emma. It turned out, this whole time, it had been an elaborate act. I'd been wanting to escape Mom's clutches for years," he explained. "But I couldn't afford to move out on my own. When she insisted I stay here after the accident, well, I felt trapped." He confided that his mother's reckless spending had been draining him dry. He'd hoped that pretending to be paralyzed would make her back off, but it had only made things worse. Then, when she'd shifted her attention to Alex, he saw an opportunity. "It was a turning point," he said wryly. As I listened to him, I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. "That's awful. What are you going to do?" He grinned, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Fight back. What do you say, Emma? Want to help me take them down?" He didn't have to ask twice. I was in. A week later, my husband and his mother returned, tanned and oblivious. "Hey. Where's my stuff?" The apartment was empty when I got back. Alex whined. "I sent it to your mother's. You can live with her, like you always wanted," I said, my voice flat. He started to protest, ranting about how I moved his belongings without permission. I tuned him out. "I want a divorce, Alex." He actually had the audacity to ask what had come over me, like I was the unreasonable one. Finally, I let him have it. I told him exactly what I thought of him, of his betrayal, of his blind loyalty to a woman who treated both of us like dirt. It was liberating. In the end, he made it easy. "You're so insolent. I should have divorced you long ago. Just like my mother said." The line went dead. I blocked his number. He was a stranger now. A few weeks later, a pre-filled divorce form arrived. I signed it, sent it back, and never looked back. It was the best decision I ever made. Life as a single woman was blissfully peaceful. I hadn't heard from Alex in months, which suited me just fine. Then, one day, I got an email. From my brother-in-law. He was overseas, living his best life. He'd heard that his mother had gone bankrupt. She'd even made it into the official gazette, a testament to her financial ruin. Apparently, Alex had tried to cover her debts, but it hadn't been enough. They'd lost the house, and now, they were sharing a tiny, one-room apartment. Karma, it seemed, had come calling. I felt a flicker of something. Not anger. Not satisfaction, exactly. More like a quiet sense of vindication. The revenge we'd plotted, the counterattack, as we'd called it, had worked. They were on their own now. And I was free. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the quiet hum of my little apartment. No more demands, no more drama, no more feeling like a prisoner in my own life. The silence, once deafening, was now a balm for my soul. My brother-in-law's email had more than just gossip. He'd enclosed a picture. There they were, Alex and his mother, looking haggard and defeated, standing in front of a rundown apartment building. Alex was thinner, his shoulders slumped, the swagger gone. Barbara, her carefully styled hair now limp and dull, clutched a worn handbag, her face a mask of bitterness. They looked miserable. My brother-in-law had written, they got what they deserved. It's a shame it took them losing everything to figure out what really matters. He was right. They'd been so blinded by greed and the need for control that they destroyed their own lives. A year passed. Life went on. I focused on my job, made new friends, even started taking those dance classes I'd always dreamed of. I was happy, truly happy, for the first time in a very long time. And then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Alex. My hand trembled as I unfolded the crisp, legal-sized paper. It was filled with apologies, pleas for another chance, and a hefty dose of self-pity. He claimed to be a changed man, that he finally realized how badly he'd messed up. He even had the gall to propose that we get back together. I think about you every day, Emma, he wrote. I know I don't deserve you, but I can't live without you. Please, let me prove to you that I can be a good husband. His words were like a bad echo, a haunting reminder of the man he used to be. I reread the letter, my heart a stone in my chest. Part of me, a tiny, wounded part, wanted to believe him. But the rest of me, the stronger, wiser part, knew better. I tossed the letter in the trash, where it belonged, and went back to my life. A few weeks later, I was leaving work when I spotted a familiar figure huddled beneath the awning of a nearby cafe. It was Barbara. She looked thinner, frilier than I remembered, her expensive clothes replaced with worn, mismatched layers. She was scavenging through her purse, her face a picture of desperation as she searched for loose change. I hesitated, torn between walking away and doing something. Against my better judgment, I walked towards her. She looked up, startled, and for a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. Shame flickered across her features, quickly replaced by a familiar defiance. Emma, she said, her voice raspy. Imagine running into you here. What are you doing here, Barbara? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She hesitated, her gaze darting around as if afraid someone might see her like this. I need to talk to you, she said finally. It's important. I should have walked away then. I should have turned on my heel and left her standing there. But some morbid curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. What about? I asked cautiously. It's about Alex, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We ended up sitting at a small, wobbly table in the back of the cafe, as far away from the other patrons as possible. Barbara, it turned out, wanted my help. Alex, unable to cope with the loss of his former life and drowning in debt thanks to his mother's spending, had spiraled into a deep depression. He'd lost his job, his apartment, everything. He was living on the streets, refusing to see anyone, refusing to accept help. He needs you, Emma, Barbara pleaded, her voice cracking. He won't listen to me. He won't listen to anyone. You're the only one he might. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I thought I'd moved on, that I'd buried the past. But seeing her there, broken and desperate, a wave of, not pity, but something akin to sadness washed over me. She'd played a huge part in our marriage falling apart, but seeing her now, stripped of her wealth and her arrogance, I realized something important. Hurting her wouldn't bring me any joy. It wouldn't erase the past. It wouldn't change anything. I took a deep breath. "Where is he?" I asked quietly. It took me a while to find him. Days turned into weeks as I followed Barbara's vague directions, searching the city's parks and shelters, my heart growing heavier with each dead end. Then, one cold evening, I found him. He was huddled beneath a bridge, his clothes ragged, his hair matted, his eyes vacant. He looked broken. I sat down next to him, not speaking, just letting the silence stretch between us. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge my presence. "Alex," I said softly, my voice barely audible above the traffic roaring overhead. "It's Emma." He flinched, his head snapping up. His eyes, once filled with arrogance and entitlement, were clouded with pain and something else, fear. "Emma?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "What are you?" "Barbara told me," I began, but he cut me off, his voice rising in panic. "Don't listen to her. She's lying. She's just trying to," he trailed off, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I reached out, hesitantly, and touched his arm. He didn't flinch away. "It's okay, Alex," I said gently. "I'm here now." I didn't know what else to say. There were no words that could erase the hurt, the betrayal, the years of pain. We sat there for a long time, the silence filled with unspoken words, with ghosts of what might have been. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, I made a decision. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about second chances. It was about compassion. I helped him to his feet, his hand trembling in mine. He was weaker than I realized, his steps unsteady. "Come on, Alex," I said, guiding him towards the street. "Let's get you something to eat." I didn't know what the future held. But as I hailed a taxi, the morning sun breaking through the clouds, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally free.